Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Marnese Jackson, one of the co-directors at the Midwest BDC, Building Decarbonization Coalition. We're going to go ahead and get started with this Advocacy 101 training. Just FYI, I am in the airport. I just can't vacation without working because I love my job. But yes, I'm going to do my best to speak loudly. And if you just can't hear me, just let me know in the chat and we'll figure some things out. So today's agenda, we're going to do some welcoming introductions. We're going to give you an overview of the agenda and objectives, talk a little bit about Midwest BDC. We'll do our standing land acknowledgement and our community norms. We will, of course, introduce our speakers, which is me. We'll do an icebreaker and some interaction in the chat. And then we'll talk about what is advocacy. We'll learn about the difference between advocacy and lobbying. Then we'll get into the type of advocacy activities that you could do and the components of developing your campaign plan, which is a part of advocacy. And then we'll get to some Q&A. How does that sound? And if you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat so we can know where you're coming from. I'm Marnese Jackson. I'm in Pontiac, Michigan. Well, not currently, I'm in Orlando, Florida. And I am the Midwest BDC Co-Director. And so today's objectives are to get a basic understanding of what advocacy is, to get a basic understanding of what advocacy versus lobbying is, to get an understanding of how to develop an advocacy campaign plan, to get an understanding of some type of advocacy activities that you can do, and then get an understanding of the difference between your theory of change, strategy, and tactics for your campaign plan that you can take away into your local or state advocacy efforts, or even federal advocacy efforts. So just FYI, the Midwest Building Decarbonization got started back in 2020 to develop and implement equitable strategies to achieve zero emissions from the Midwestern building sector by 2050. Yes, ambitious. Our regional priority states are Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, Missouri, Indiana, and Iowa. We do have regional and national partners, and we do welcome anyone. So, of course, you can come learn from us because we are a learning environment and a growing environment. So, I'm Marnese, as I said before, and this is Jacob in the middle. He's our co-director and our manager of building and technology policy. He's in Des Moines, Iowa. And Maggie, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Marnese. My name's Maggie Heiser. I'm the communications manager here at the Coalition, and I am based out of Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna try to mute myself while I'm not talking. So, well, I'm gonna be talking the whole time, so we won't get any feedback. But the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, as I said before, was founded in 2020 to play a leadership role in convening stakeholders and allies around a regional decarbonization strategy. Yes, strategy. Midwest BDC is advancing a first of its kind equity first coalition model with a regionally specific theory of change. Yes, theory of change. We will be talking about that. And Midwest BDC connects individuals representing a mix of local, state, regional, and national organizations. From local environmental and climate justice advocates to nationally recognized big greens like our Sierra clubs. And this diversity is vital in fostering an ecosystem of collaboration and the ability to learn from experts in all facets of this work. We have active participants from each of the 8 states in our region. So we welcome you. And then our standing land acknowledgement here at Midwest BDC is that we first are acknowledging that we are in stolen land and that we are occupying this stolen land from our indigenous brothers and sisters. And this is the first step that we can do to move towards efforts like land back and giving our indigenous and tribal brothers and sisters their land back. So, and to also to understand that we are all complicit in this fight for fight against white supremacy culture, which is plaguing our society, the social movements that we are a part of, especially fighting for climate change. So when you go out, please make sure that you're being respectful to our environment, our land, our tribal communities, and of course, take a step back role when engaging with our tribal communities because this is their land and we must honor and respect it. Our standing community norms here at MWBDC is to know its intent and lead towards impact, use I statements, assume good intentions. We do not require an on-screen, off-screen, so that means you are more than welcome to be on screen. Today we are in webinar format because some trainings that we have been Zoom bombed and we just trying to cut down on that. So talking about advocacy, you never know what you're gonna get. So we don't require people usually to be on screen. We ask people to practice self-awareness, ask themselves, why am I talking? Why aren't I talking? Practice active listening, stop and witness, listening for understanding and not to respond. Everyone's a teacher, everyone's a learner. Share responsibility for keeping these norms and adhere to the speak indicators in the chat. So you can put, if you have a question, put your name in the chat and then also raise your hand. So those are the speak indicators. Of course, show up in your authentic self, speak to the whole group, minimize the use of jargon. If you are asked to explain, just please do so we all can be on the same page. And then participate and lean into discomfort with some of the information that you may hear because that's the only way you're going to grow. And just FYI, you will get a copy of these slides and this recording in the follow-up email. So thanks for registering. Guess what? We have another training after this one coming up next week. It's going to be on Energy Justice 101. You will learn where your energy comes from and how can you advocate for energy justice at the state and local level. We will talk definitely about the case studies here in Michigan against our DTE energy utility provider. So we have the people of Detroit, Kamal, Chohara, here to facilitate that training next week. So an icebreaker. In the chat, what U.S. state have you visited that surprised you the most? The state that I visited that surprised me the most is Colorado. I got to go hiking, and I had actually 2 seasons in the week that I was there. I went hiking and I went sledding, and it was just really beautiful when I seen all the mountains and just the land and the plains. So in the chat, if you could put what U.S. state have you visited that surprised you the most? Thank you so much, Sierra. Telefero, Seattle, Washington. Thank you. And let's just keep this going. Okay, Texas, Brooklyn, New York. I agree, Colorado. Yes, Tiffany. Maine. I've never been to Maine before. I would like to go to Maine. Okay. So let's keep this going. Okay, so let's just get into it. What is advocacy? Advocacy efforts, including lobbying, are critically important to the success of many nonprofits. Advocacy by 501c3 organizations is legal as long as your organization follows the rules. Of course, like other work, your organization does advocacy requires financial support. There are many ways in which you can raise money for advocacy, including fundraising, events, membership dues, individual donations, and grants from public or private foundations. And so with that, the advocacy strategy framework shows some examples of strategic approaches you might choose to use based on your campaign and theory of change. For example, if you're running a campaign to stop a pipeline, you might be weighing the trade-offs of a litigation strategy to sue the company over permits. A community can mobilize strategy. Uh-oh, got a question. Thank you, Minnesota. A community mobilizing strategy to weigh in during their public comment process and a media strategy to put additional pressure on key decision makers. So here in Michigan, we use all three formats against, once again, our energy provider, DTE Energy. So in the chat, could you look at this post? What strategic approaches are you currently using in your campaigns or in your advocacy efforts? So I see a lot of people from different organizations. What are you using to build out your strategy framework? Because we all know, and a lot of us who are familiar, advocacy is public support for a recommendation or for a particular cause. So of a policy. So here in Michigan, we are fighting for, we have different advocacy. For example, I'm gonna continue using DTE Energy because they have high utility rates. So different forms of advocacy that we use, of course, leadership development and capacity building. There's a corporate campaign where we hold different corporate entities accountable for donating to DTE. Of course, we have litigation where we intervene in rate cases against DTE Energy. And of course, we have the coalition building that, we're a part of. MWBDC, we have Michigan Building Decarb, we have the DTE Work For Me campaign. So those are some of the things that we use for our strategy framework. And thanks so much for putting in the chat, Tiffany. You said media coalition building campaign development. So lobbying is any attempt by individuals or private interest groups to influence the decisions of government. In its original meaning, it's referred to efforts to influence the votes of legislators, generally in the lobbying outside the legislative chamber, lobbying in some form of inevitable in any political system. So right here on this chart, you see a lot of numbers, right? Because organizations can only do, nonprofit organizations, 501c3s can only do so much lobbying. And much advocacy work, including efforts to influence the executive branch actions, does not constitute lobbying. Yet, contrary to popular misconception, 501c3 public charities, including houses of worship and public foundations, can lobby. In fact, the Internal Revenue Service has stated that public charities may lobby freely, so as long as the lobbying is within generous specific limits, as noted on the slide. So under the federal tax law, lobbying generally consists of communications that are intended to influence specific legislation. How much lobbying your organization can engage in depends on the test it uses to calculate its limit. The optional 501H expenditure test or the default part test. An electing public charity may spend up to a quarter of its overall lobbying limit on grassroots lobbying, such as urging the general public to communicate the organization's position on legislation to legislators, or up to the entire amount on direct lobbying, such as telling legislators or their staff to support or oppose legislation, or urging the organization's member to do so. For example, if your organization overall lobbying limit is $100,000, you can spend up to $25,000 on grassroots lobbying, and then the other half, $75,000 on direct lobbying, or alternatively spend the full $100,000 on direct lobbying. So most organizations will be able to engage in more lobbying by electing to measure their lobbying under the Section 501H. Remember that, 501H of the Internal Revenue Code. And so the 501H expenditure test provides more generous lobbying limits than the insubstantial part test. It defines a clear dollar amount that the electing public charity may spend on lobbying, and lobbying limits vary depending on the size of the organization's annual expenditures. So organizations will overall with overall expenditures of $500,000 or less per year, for example, can spend as much as 20% of their budget on lobbying. And you can use the chart on the screen or an online calculator to determine your organization's lobbying limit. So Midwest BDC will fall under the 500 to 1 million range of lobbying limit. And so, as you see, there are two options to measure lobbying for public charities. You got your insubstantial part and the 501h expenditure. So, as I said before, you'll get a copy of these slides, but the insubstantial part default test for all 501c3s. There's no clear definition of lobbying. There's no insubstantial is about 3 to 5% of an organization's activities and based on paid and unpaid activities. And see the 501h expenditure, one-time election, you have to file with the IRS and use that form 5768. You have to have the clear definitions of lobbying, and it has to be dollar-based formula to calculate lobbying limits. Only spending counts, not volunteer time. Okay. And so these are some examples of 501c3s, 501c4s, 501c5s, and 501c6. And then you have those political organizations, 527s, and the examples of, for example, Bozoller, their tax treatment is tax exempt, tax deductible contributions, and then our lobbying activities is limited, and then our electoral activities can't support or oppose candidates. So Midwest BDC is under the fiduciary of Fresh Energy. We are working towards our 501c3 status. We do not, we cannot oppose or support candidates. However, we all know our message is more so for clean energy, which may be seen more liberal, but however, we cannot oppose or support candidates at this time. So don't worry, you will get copied of these slides. So this is what you need to know for foundation, when you're trying to do advocacy with grants. So with advocacy efforts, including lobbying, are critically important to the success of many nonprofits. And so advocacy by 501c3 organizations is legal. And of course, like other work, the organization does advocacy requires financial support. There are many ways in which you can raise money for advocacy, including fundraising events, membership dues, individual donations, and grants from public or private foundations. The organization may choose one or all of these options. Chances are you will want to approach foundations to support your advocacy efforts and activities. And so when you do, there are a few things you should know about it, foundations and how to successfully obtain their funding for advocacy and lobbying. Sometimes the wording in your grant proposal or report can make all the difference. As an example at the beginning of what we were talking about. And so you, in the resource that I'm going to follow up with you, you will find information on the rules and govern advocacy funding for private and public foundations. And the different kinds of advocacy that you can choose to engage is as a nonprofit, and the type of grants you can see to support the advocacy. So don't worry, I will definitely send you the links to the do's and don'ts of writing a grant proposal in the report so you can get your money. So just to go back, lobbying versus advocacy. Lobbying attempts to influence specific legislation through direct or grassroots communication and legislators or their staff. Advocacy is a range of activities that seek to bring about systemic social change. That's what we're all fighting for. Advocacy can occur without lobbying, but lobbying cannot occur without advocacy. Often, advocacy seeks to address root causes as well as the symptoms of a social and economic problem. And lobbying is considered constitutionally protected free speech. And just to add, action may include community organizing, public policy, lobbying, litigation, or nonpartisan voter engagement. So we advocate every day to advance issues we care about, right? What makes it personal is that it builds our own experience, beliefs, and biases. And advocacy is, as I said before, defined as the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. And advocacy may be a big A or a small A effort, whether the cause is personal to you or a common among people. And so the underlying process is the same. So we need to gather evidence, find solutions, demonstrate impact, and make the case to the decision makers. So we advocate every day. And formally and informally, we advance causes for ourselves and others in the workplace, for our children at school, and for our community. And what makes the process personal is that advocacy always starts with the individual, with our unique built-in beliefs and biases. And advocacy is a continuum of engagement with education on one end, lobbying on the other. So as you see, a lot of us start with educating by engaging in nonpartisan analysis, studying and research, and sharing information about a cause, mission, or issue, which is a part of a lot of our nonprofit organizations. And then advocacy, once again, is arguing in favor of a cause, idea, policy, or course of action, can be internal or external. And then lobbying, attempting to influence specific legislation at the local, state, or federal level via direct ask or grassroots organizing. And since public engagement is recruiting allies and a base support for all three of these different things. So the advocacy avenues for advocacy, you start with partisan political lobbying is the yellow light. And I love this because when you get to the green light, you're doing a whole bunch of things of like organizing, providing education, nonpartisan voter education, influencing corporations, educating legislators, attending educational conferences, lobbying exceptions. You all participate if you're in the environmental movement, regulatory efforts, and then you get to know your legislators. And then, of course, we all have to back it up with research, training, and then litigation. So with unlimited lobbying, we are organizing public education, nonpartisan voter education, influencing corporations, educating legislators, educational conferences, we're lobbying exceptions. And then we participate in litigation, training, research, and getting to know our legislators. And then most of the time we are participating in regulatory efforts. So the 3 Ps of this, we want to make things personal, and we have to be professional, and this is physiological. So the motivation for engaging in advocacy typically falls into 3 of these areas, the 3 Ps. And if I ask my people that I'm organizing for an increase increase in participation, it's kind of like always a combination of all these 3s, because I like to tell my story. I'm doing this because it's it's personal, it's a profession, and it's a passion, which I can align with being physiological. So we all have to be aware of our biases. We must dig deep and acknowledge our own unconscious bias when we're talking about any social issues, especially when it has to do with race, class, sex, gender, age, and ethnicity. We must also be careful about the biases of exceptionalism. And then our other 2 things we need to be aware of, we have to make sure that we ask for help, be aware of the obstacles that we may come up against, and then we have to lean in. Some obstacles we may face is lack of time, lack of knowledge, fear of reprisal. Some of us may lean onto someone else will do it. And if not, then who will do it? And some people, you may hear, my voice doesn't count. Yes, it does. So when you're doing your advocacy efforts, just be aware of these different obstacles that you may run up against. And then we have to lean into building relationship. Local advocacy has both immediate and long-term potential impact. Advocacy is a long game, and with relationships at its core. Here at the MWBDC, we abide by the MS principles for organizing, and relationship building is the core of how we get things done. So you can make a real difference when you start with relationship building. Leverage good news stories for greater impact locally and on social media. Listen to understand the concerns of decision makers. Join your professional organizations, associations. join district planning teams or other boards that's related to the topic that you're advocating for. Adopt resolutions affirming the importance of art, sciences, and then attend school board meetings. People tend to leave out school boards because, you know, we're fighting for environmental and climate justice, and we're going to be leaving this earth to our children, right? So we have to get the children on board. So the first place to do is attend school board meetings so they can learn about these issues. And then urge community members to take a stronger advocacy role. And then get help. Okay. Yeah. So some advocacy activities that you can do. And in the chat, I would like to know what you have been doing. So when you think about advocacy, what does that look like for you? Thank you so much. Yes, school board meetings. So I spoke about lobbying, but the first thing you can start to do when you do your advocacy efforts is write to elected officials. Writing to your elected officials can be very effective, especially if the letter is personable and brief. Mail letters and emails are great options for connecting with legislators. Also, watch for alerts on bills and issues from organizations like any organization that you're a part of or any respective organization that's in your state. So tips for writing your letter or email. You gotta be specific, you gotta keep it brief, make it local, and make it personal. Be specific. If you are writing about a bill that has been introduced, and include the bill number and the name. For example, Senate Bill 199, the debris landfill bill, for example. And if possible, name the bill's main sponsor. Keep it brief. Focus on one major point. If you attempt to tackle so much stuff, it will dilute the letter and people will get confused. But also back it up if possible. Provide a couple of brief, logical arguments as to why your legislators should support your position, because they got to go up against the opposition and the legislator. If your local newspaper has editorials in support of your issue or community members have written letters to the editor supporting your position, clip the article and include them. If the, for example, Midwest BDC or representative organization has shared information on the issue or another trustworthy source, include it, okay? Make it local. Legislators are mostly interested in the impacts that bills will have in their districts. The more that you demonstrate the issue will have a local impact, the more compelling your letter will be. Then lastly, make it personal. If you can tell a story about how this bill or the issue will affect you or your family, be sure to include it. Personal stories are more memorable, and it just shows the real impact that legislation can have on their constituents. Thank you so much. Voter engagement. Okay. So next thing you can do is call your elected officials. Calling elected officials is a quick and easy way to communicate your position on a bill or an issue. There are several different sources that you can use to find the phone number for elected officials. So tips for making your call. Identify your issue area. A staff member, not the lawmaker himself, will most likely answer the phone. Okay. My representative is Mender Carter. I have all her stuff in my cell number because they call me before she calls me, but she'll end up calling me because we have that personal relationship now. But before you begin to discuss your topic or issue, it is important to verify you are speaking with the staff member that handles that issue or who can convey your message to the elected official. Once again, be specific. On the phone is answer, or when leaving a voicemail, state who you are, why you are calling. If you're calling to support or oppose legislation, it's very helpful to state some reasons behind your position. Remember, you do not have to be an expert. You can express concern or support for an issue and not be an expert. It's okay. Meet with the elected officials, okay? Remember, they are going to reclaim their time, so you gotta be quick and concise. Lawmakers are elected to represent you. However, having a face-to-face meeting is a very effective way to build relationships with your elected official. Remember that legislators are elected to represent constituents like you. You voted for them, okay? Most lawmakers welcome the opportunity to meet with the people they represent, and constituents lobbying is a proven way to effectively influence public policy. So when you are requesting a meeting, take the job of a legislator is to represent constituents like you. Remember that. Clearly state your concern, ask if your legislator would be willing to meet with you. Be prepared to offer a couple of different times you're available. Also, be sure to convey any timeliness to consider when finding time to talk with your lawmaker. For example, impending vote on a bill. Legislators are very busy, as I said before, and are most likely to meet with you if you give them good reasons. One way to do this is to clearly state on the phone why the issue is critical and timely. On the phone, not text messaging. Another way to accomplish this goal is by organizing a group of constituents that want to meet with their legislator together. Contact your friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers to see who will be willing to join you and when. The more support you can generate around the issue, the more likely your legislator will set aside time to meet with you. So it's important to communicate with the lawmaker who will attend the meeting and who they will be representing prior to the meeting. And additionally, it's important to keep the meeting size manageable, 1 to 5 people, so don't bring the whole neighborhood. For example, if your legislator prefers offer to meet somewhere in their district. If they are willing, ask if you can meet somewhere convenient in town, possibly your house, a home, coffee house, restaurant. So for preparing for your meeting, once you have scheduled a meeting with your legislator, take time to do some research. You will be more comfortable and come across credible and persuasive during the meeting. Here are some questions that you could be asking. What is the legislator's background, birthplace, religion, previous education, etc.? What issues are important to the legislator? On what committees does the legislator serve? How might the legislator position on the issue differ from your own and why? Okay, so provide this basic information, which will help with trying to convince them when arguing your position. So at the meeting, okay, be adaptable, be yourself, tell the truth, anticipate opposition, okay? Lawmakers, especially if you are meeting with them at their state house, can be pulled in many directions on the days when the session has happened. I have learned that a couple weeks ago. Try to be flexible about interruptions and to keep meetings flowing as best as possible. Also, be prepared to summarize your main points in 1 to 5 minutes. Keep it concise, bullet points, okay? Be yourself and share a piece of information or story that will help you establish a rapport early on in your meeting. It could be useful to mention a common hobby, interest, acquaintance. For example, Brenda Carter, she is a part of a sister sorority, and we can always connect on how she always wear blue, but her sorority color is red. So find some commonality or something. Tell the truth. The best way to build a long-term relationship with your legislator is to establish yourself as a credible source. As I said, be honest, and also have the facts, okay? And if you do not have the answer to something, it's okay to say, I don't have the answer to that. Anticipate opposition. Consider what arguments the legislator might have already heard from your opponents and be prepared to refute the opposition. Leave something behind. Provide the legislator with written information, a fact sheet, a local newspaper, and then request action. Ask your legislator to take a specific action on your issue before you go. You want something from them. You voted for them. And so this is leading up to where we all as environmental and climate justice advocates and activists, we do a lot of advocacy at the Public Service Commission or Public Utility Commission. And for those, just a refresher, Public Utilities Commissions, PUCs or PSCs hold power over key decisions related to energy resources that power our homes and businesses and often pollute our air and water. And so these decisions include how much we pay in electricity bill, what our energy sources are, and whether new energy production facilities are approved. So for example, a proposal to build or update a power plant to invest in solar or energy efficiency or to change customers' rates generally comes before the Public Service Commission. So while the Public Utility Commission or public service commissions are free to regulate utilities in accordance to the public interest, they may be limited in their ability to confront new challenges that fall outside of the scope of their traditional public interest goals. So among these challenges include climate change, rising costs, air pollution, new technologies, and racial discrimination. So that's where you can do some of your advocacy efforts. And so usually at these utility commissions, they contest cases. Most of the time it's litigation, or often to start to finish in less than 1 year. They set policies by rulemakings. They have workshops or work groups, often lead to policies or shape utilities, applications, or contested cases. And then they have the general commission meetings. And so with the rule proceedings, PUCs also reach many of their important decisions in rulemaking proceedings. Rulemaking proceedings generally address rules, policy, practices, and procedures that apply to the entire regulated industry, the gas, electric, or local telephone industries. For example, most PUCs adopt rules governing the beginning of a new service, deposits, payment plans, etc. So these are the people that you really need to get to know. Some have power, some don't, some are appointed, some are elected. And representation is not dominated by communities of color. So with these informal proceedings, commissions also take all kinds of actions outside of formal proceedings. For example, a competitive electric supplier might write a letter to the commission for approval to change the practices used to switch customers from a local company to a competitive supplier. The PSC might respond with an answer without conducting any formal proceedings. Or a low-income customer might request a meeting with the commission to discuss whether the commission should offer lower payment plans to lower-income customers, and the commission might agree to do so without a formal hearing. And see, last is accusatory, I can't say that proceeding, similar to civil court cases where you are sworn in under oath and can cause cross-examine utility customers, can intervene, which is an advocacy effort in these proceedings where utility commissions and other boards formally decide cases based on the testimony of witnesses, and testimonies are an advocacy effort. So get into testimony, preparing to give your testimony. So with public testimony, it becomes part of the official record for an issue and can send a strong message to decision makers and the media about the public position on the matter. So every committee chairperson has an email distribution list that you can request to join so that you can receive direct communication from their committee chairs offering regarding committee agendas, hearings on key bills that you care about. And so the testimony on bills is organized typically by a proponent, opponent, and interested party. And it is standard practice to require testimony to be submitted 24 hours in advance of a committee hearing, a written testimony. So sometimes that usually doesn't happen, just depends on your state, but that usually is the process. So with writing your testimony, introduce yourself, begin your testimony by offering your name, your profession, if appropriate. If you are representing an organization, briefly describe your organization or your group. Only one member of your organization should officially testify on behalf of the group. If others in the group wish to testify, they should do so as individuals. Summarize before describing your position in detail. Briefly describe the points that you will be covering to give listeners an idea of what your testimony will cover. And make sure you back it up. Provide brief, logical arguments why you are supporting a certain position on an issue. If you can tell a story about how the issue will affect you or your community or your family, be sure to include that information. Also, try to include a few specific facts to back up your position from credible sources, okay? Be courteous after introducing yourself, and thank audience for the opportunity to submit the issue. So when you're preparing to testify, confirm the details, submit the testimony, practice your testimony, bring visuals, and bring people, okay? Although you might usually just submit written testimony on an issue, if you are able to deliver your testimony in person, it is recommended that you do so and present your statement orally. Oral testimony is far more powerful and impactful and persuasive than written statement. Before you attend the public hearing, prepare by doing the following. Like I said before, confirm the details, verify the date, time, location, and the meeting beforehand. Also, find out which portion of the meeting will be dedicated to public comment and what time you must arrive if you want to speak. Make sure that you practice so you won't be cut off, because sometimes there are time limits. And you submit on time with a witness slip. Sometimes that's required at the State House. And sometimes it takes 24 hours in advance with a witness form that will ask for your name and address, affiliation, if any, and what bill you wish to speak about. Practice your testimony out loud until it's smooth and fits within the time frame. I'm telling you, it goes by really quick. Point out alternatives. If you are opposing a bill or a plan, do not simply say why it's a bad idea. Whenever possible, try to include alternatives to a bad proposal. Okay. And then bring visuals. If you know there's a power plant in your community that has smoke coming out of it, take pictures, have maps and everything. Okay. It gives support, and then it also gives your argument on your position more support. Okay, so testifying. Okay, this is the time where adrenaline is rushing. You may even cry, and that's okay. But breathe and relax. If you are nervous when you get up there to speak, you do not have to start right away. Look at your notes and take a couple of deep breaths before beginning. Speak clearly and pause for emphasis. And if you are nervous, you may speak more quickly than normal, which is normal, right? And so as you speak, be sure to look up from your speech as often as possible and make eye contact, right? Tell the truth. If your legislator asks you a question that you do not know the answer to, do not make something up, okay? Instead, say that you do not know, or either offer a follow-up or defer to another witness who may be able to answer the question, okay? So another advocacy effort that you can do is write a letter to the editor. Letters to the editor, people still read the newspaper and they still sell them, are a good way to build public interest around an issue. So writing about pending legislation is one important way to get to the attention of elected officials. Letters to the editor are fairly easy to get published if you follow the tips, okay? So find out how to send your letter. Many newspapers prefer to have letters to the editor emailed to them. Because some papers have a separate email account for letters to the editor, call or look on the newspaper's website to confirm where you should send the letter. Include contact information. Newspapers follow up with people who submit letters to the editor before printing the letters to verify the identity of the author. Be sure to include your full name, address, date, time, phone number when submitting a letter. Keep it brief. Most papers have a policy only writing to 200, 300 words. Focus on your main points in the letter, okay? So back it up, provide logical arguments. Why are you supporting a certain position on the issue? Try include specific facts and personal anecdotes. So engaging on social media is very popular and is a very important tool to get friends and family involved on the issue that you care about, right? So choose the right platform. We have a lot, and each social media platform has its own strength. And so Instagram is great for sharing photos. Twitter is good for sharing short, to the point, personal thoughts. Choose the right platform to share your content or tailor your message to the strength of the platform you're trying to use. Ask why you are posting before posting on social media, and consider what the point of your post is. There are many reasons to share your thoughts with your followers. Raise awareness, ask for donations, rally supporters, try outreach to legislators, and more. So knowing what you want to accomplish before you post can help you create a better content for following and sharing your allies. So with sharing posts from your allies is important because it helps you get more views and more followers. And the algorithms on many platforms prioritize content with strong engagement. You can help spread messages more widely by sharing your allies' posts to boost their engagement. Screenshot your opponent's stuff. When sharing content from the opposing side on an issue, think carefully about sharing their messages. Your share of their posts boosts their engagement and can cause the algorithm choosing content to display to show their posts more to users, okay? So if you need to share a post from an opponent, consider taking a screenshot of their post and uploading it as an image with your post. This allows you to capture what they are saying without boosting engagement on their message, because we don't want to do that. If you disagree with it, we'll make it personal. Just like elected officials, your friends, family are more likely to connect with your post if you share why an issue is important to you. Okay, so some legal tips on using media for advocacy. And a lot of us are using these different outlets. So make sure that it needs to be, at the end of the day, it needs to be counted as lobbying, okay? And I'll send that fact sheet up in the follow-up. And make sure that what you're sending out is partisan content and does not attribute to any organization or any political party. So lastly, organize your community. Bring in folks together to discuss and act on important issues can be a key part of advocacy. And we need this, right? Because we need to raise awareness about the concerns so we can push elected officials and to have a bigger movement. So being a part of groups throughout your community can help you in organizing an issue. Remember, you have to build those relationships, abide by those semester principles for democratic organizing. And so your involvement may provide opportunities to raise tangible steps groups can take to make positive change, like reducing waste, of course, and even or helping an organization to cut back on their carbon footprint. Local organizations often provide more frequent volunteer or engagement opportunities. For example, civic organizations and area planning commissions can also be a great way to make change in your community. Connect with other advocates, right? Building relationships with other leaders in your community can help grow your advocacy efforts. For example, everyone pays a utility bill. So connecting with organizations like, for example, the NAACP or your local, once again, PTA is a great way to boost your advocacy effort because once again, everybody pays a utility bill. So social media can be important too to get friends and family involved on issues that you care about, as I said before. And it's a good way to drive outreach, donations, and rallies. So, and it's also a good way to bring communities together because people chat on Facebook, they respond. A lot of people today are called social media activists. So it's a good way to get people going, but we still have to use the old school practices of getting involved in the community locally. And so some research you can use, please, if you are interested in calling your state and local government, of course, everybody has a Michigan.gov, Ohio.gov. That's how you can get in touch with your local representative. But then if you're trying to go to the federal level, you just have to reach out to the White House or, within the field that we're in, we all have some direct contacts that we can reach out to, but they are busy. So when you're developing your campaign plan for your advocacy, which is an organized course of action to achieve a goal, we don't want to be out here being advocates and doing advocacy planning without any real campaigning goals, right? So it helps us sequence and test out our theory of change statements. Campaign planning helps us to navigate uncertainty and plan for different scenarios. When we're having good strategies, acknowledge limited resource, help us focus, including giving us clarity around when to say no. Bad strategies are often unrealistic and sometimes it's too vague. So all these details in your campaign plan is very crucial. And it also is a very powerful tool for recruitment and retention of activists, students, staff, family members. And then also campaign planning is a powerful tool for, raising resources, which is needed for a campaign plan. So when we're building our campaign plan, of course, there are different building blocks, right? We're going to talk today about your theory of change and strategy. And we'll get more into all these other things a little bit later in our training program. But all these different activities, if we do strategic tactics, then we know we're going to be specific about achieving our goal of our campaign. So with these key building blocks of our campaign, you must have goals, you must have a theory of change, you must have strategy, you must create a power analysis, because we're going up against some people who have a lot of power, and then we must be specific about our tactics. And so when you're feeling confused about what we mean when we talk about strategy, don't worry. Different folks use these terms differently. So with all these different blocks of the campaign, your goal is what we want to do to win. Our theory of change describes why we win. And our strategy explains how we will win it and the medium to long-term plan necessary to achieve those goals. And then within the power analysis, identifies who can help us deliver the win. And then with those tactics are the activities that support our strategy. And so that's how it might look for different organizations' mission. It may look different for different organizations, but this is pretty much the basics. So a theory of change is a description of why a certain program and set of activities will result in us achieving our campaign goal. To help us clarify the root cause of the problem you are working to solve, what exactly needs to change to achieve your goal, some ideas for how to change it. So the theory of change can help you clarify how change happens, what progress and success look like, and what it takes to get there. And then it will identify and account for factors that may account for success, effective success. It also can help you know what resources are needed to create change and to define what is within or outside of your sphere of accountability. And then you'll know what questions to ask, what data to collect, and how to make decisions that lead to better results. A theory of change is not a static document that sits on your shelf or file or a fixed plan that hinders innovation. So you have to be flexible with the theory of change, right? Theory. And an item to check off your to-do list to satisfy external stakeholders. So we're not doing this just to say we're doing it. Or a neat way to package up what you are doing now. So with the theory of change, starting from the bottom, it provides strategic direction, it creates proven results, and then offer more support of what we're trying to do. And this would create sustainable social change. So some components, you need to have a needs statement, the issue that your program exists to address, the target population, who is your program designed to engage, a core program components, what elements of the program will create the change you want to see in the world, then the outcomes, of course, state the change, make sure it's measurable, use those SMARTY goals that your program aims to achieve for the defined target population. And then hypothesis, create an if-then statement that describes the outcomes of your work. So when developing your theory of change, understand the shared vision of what you want to achieve, understand the problem and the root causes. You have to identify the people and the relationships that created and maintain the problem. And then understand the external context and trends, and then identify what needs to change and have some ideas of how to change it. So with the population of people you hold yourself accountable to in order to meet the desired outcomes. That's a question that we all have to ask. What is the population of people? Some guiding questions to identify those needs is, what is the scope of the issue to be solved, and what are the root causes and barriers to the resolutions these calls are? And I would use a SWOT analysis for that. But then some other guiding questions: define your opportunity. What is your program's value add in relation to the issue? What part can you solve? How is your organization positioned to such a way to solve this issue? Are there any evidence-based advocacy efforts that provide insight about what may improve or exacerbate the issue? Another question you could probably ask is, what specific activities or campaigns will you run? How often will you do these activities and for how long? And what is the intensity? And so some of these outcomes, as I said before, use those SMARTY goals, make sure it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. What are the changes you expect by this work in your community and the target population? What will be different? What will be better? Are your outcomes make sense for your core components, and are your outcomes realistic and attainable? So for public engagement, which a lot of us do, what segments of the public are you counting on to achieve your goals? What do those people know about this campaign? And what are you asking those people to do, and will they do it? So that's a part of that relationship building I was talking about. And so with your theory of change, make sure it's clear, concise, and it's a living document. Ours is on our website, the MWBDC. And you need to make sure that includes the needs, the target population, activities, core components, the outcomes, your hypothesis or assumptions, and should include several iterations. And you can redo it, and redo it as many times as you would like or as needed. So lastly, theory of change describes your understanding of the way the world works, why we win or lose campaigns, build or don't build power. Based on evidence, for example, bold climate legislation has been passed in states where multiracial cross-class coalitions organizing at scale to shift public understanding of what is necessary and possible. Elect a pro-climate majority and hold decision makers accountable. The strategy describes the medium to long-term plan necessary to achieve your goals informed by your theory of change. For example, shift media narrative around 100% renewables, expand coalitions active base with a focus on key areas of the state, or 3, build out a C4 program to increase the resources available for direct lobbying and electoral work. And some tactics are described as specific actions you will take in service of your strategy. For example, publish op-eds in the 5 largest newspapers across the state. Identify 7 new activist teams in key state senate districts. Will carry out 3 accountability actions per month with 50 plus people. That's being specific and it's measurable. And then 3 concert fundraisers across the state with raise over $5,000 to support electoral programs. So with the theory of change, it describes your understanding of the way the world works, why we win or lose campaigns, build or don't build power based on evidence. Strategy describes the medium to long-term plan necessary to achieve your goals, informed by your theory of change. And tactics describes the specific actions you will take to service your strategy. So raise your hand. We can't come off from you yet. Why is strategy important? And you can put that in the chat, reflecting on your own experience. Why is strategy important? A few thoughts from what I have learned is, of course, testing the assumptions that underline our theory of change. So if in the course of implementing our strategy, we recognize that we have made incorrect assumptions about how the world works, it might lead to us to update our theory of change, or our strategy help us make tough decisions about what work we should work on or don't work on, and allocate our limited resources, time, money, staff, and activists. So in the chat, why is strategy important to you? Thank you for responding. Strategies to keep us focused and ready for change plans. Exactly. And I like the fact that strategy can help be a powerful tool for recruitment and retention for staff and activists. Navigate uncertainty. Yes. And, it's important because it helps us set up for the end game and hopefully sustain the win that we all want. So I want to give you an example of Sunrise Movement. Their goal, and I get this from Climate Advocacy Lab, what we want to win is the power. Their theory of change is why we will win. power to people and active base of support groups. We build our power by talking to people. We also grow our power through escalated moral protests, political power, a critical mass of supportive public officials. We vote out corrupted officials and vote in real leaders who will stand with us. And then the people's alignment, movements and groups united by the shared vision of government that fights for dignity and justice for all. So with the Sunrise Movement's leadership, they talk a lot about strategy and co-creating and sharing their strategy openly with activist leaders, which is a part of their organization's DNA. And their goal is to win the Green New Deal that transitions every aspect of American society to 100% clean energy and renewable energy, which guarantees livable wage jobs for anyone who needs one and ensures a just transition for both workers and frontline communities, all in the next 10 years, right? And so their theory of change describes why they will be able to win based on their understanding of the past social movements. That's key. Study past social movements and owning organizing experience. So as they said, people power leads to political power, which leads to alignment between our movements and the government. And so with the Sunrise Movement, they set a 5-year strategy when they launched back in 2017. And they launched the movement to make climate change matter in the midterm elections and to make the entire country feel the urgency of the crisis. And they did. And winning governing power through the 2020 election and engage in mass non-cooperation to win. And so their tactics they have employed that flow from the strategy from running and endorsing candidates like AOC, which led to high-profile sit-ins at Nancy Pelosi's office and the youth climate strike in 2019. And so they had running and endorsing candidates as well as mobilizing thousands of volunteers to get to vote in 2020 election. And this is a series. So can you give me why did this work for them? Why did Sunrise Movement strategy and their theory of change work? Why do you think it worked? As I was laying out their timeline, as you can see on the screen. I think it worked because they used tactics from the past social movements, and then they also was really working with the political environment. And you hear a lot now from legislators about climate change, regardless if you're opposing or for. You hear a lot about climate change and why it matters. Since 2017. So let's talk about strategy. If you have some pen and paper, we're gonna take a couple minutes before we head up out of here. How did you go about developing a strategy of your current campaign? And it can be anything. It can be a past campaign. Let's take about 5 minutes. How did you go about developing the strategy? Did you all just wake up one day and say, hey, we're gonna do this? Did you actually put some planning behind it? How did you test your theory of change? And what tactics did you use? So MWA strategy chart. Midwest, I want to say Midwest Academy, Tiffany. I think that's what that is. Yes. Midwest Academy is a very key strategy to use. Okay. What else did you use to talk about strategy? Regulating work timely with election and showing up for the specifics of the cause. Okay, showing up. Okay. So when you're understanding your strategic capacity, there are three critical areas for successful social movement. And narrative capacity is our ability to wire stories in a way that shapes and shifts social norms, rules, and our larger understanding of what is possible. Disruptive capacity is our ability to interrupt the regular operations of the systems of authority so they are forced to confront our movements and meet demands. And the electoral or institutional capacity is the ability to affect a politician's electability or force institutional changes. And I believe that's what Sunrise did, these three areas. And so although all through building each of these um, capacities, we are credibly a threat to the decision makers. Some, excuse me. So this is defined as the ability of a movement to navigate uncertainty and sustain collective action and effectively allocate resources. So some resources for you. These are some books that are good for organizations who are trying to do some strategy at the state level and local level. And so with strategic capacity is the most powerful when it's held up collectively, in other words. And it should recite across an organization or coalition. So I'm gonna go back and revisit this book, especially with our coalition. But it is very important when organizations find their power and challenge, they're not challenged and things are not going to be planned. And so we have to make sure that the third, that is always contextual, because the uncertainties we face is the face in our advocacy work are also contextual. So there's no one size fit all, and people like to make it one size fit all, and that's why I love our coalition, because we are flexible. But we have to take note around strategic capacity. Yes, and these books are on Amazon. And don't worry, if you register, I'm going to send all the links for you all to have. So don't worry. So to sum it up, strategy describes how you will win, the medium to long-term plan necessary to achieve your goals. Strategy is important because it helps us to test our theory of change, make tough decisions, and navigate uncertainty. And strategy should inform our tactics, not the other way around. And we build a necessary strategic capacity through learning capabilities and resources. So I'm going to show this video. Hopefully I can show it, but just basics around environmental advocacy. I'm gonna stop and reshare. So I can make sure I got the sound. Okay, so that is all I have. Are there any questions? So I know we're going to probably use a lot of this information to move our coalition forward around strategy, our boot camp that's coming up in the fall. So if there's any questions, I appreciate you all staying on and coming to our Advocacy 101 training. And hopefully we'll see you next week at our energy justice training on next week. Oh, I see something in the chat. Okay, when doing our work, how do we partnership with other groups to build our cause? Well, if you're speaking of the coalition, usually some ways that we have partner is doing the sign-ons for particular legislation. We have, of course, spoke on panels, trainings, provided that because we're a resource. And Maggie, if you could throw the link in the chat for the training next week. But usually those are the ways that we partners thus far. But I think in the future we're going to be building out more campaign type of work because we are a coalition that is supposed to support local efforts. So I hope that answered your question. But of course, we can have some more thoughts on where our next step should be going on partnering with other organizations. And FYI, the link is in the chat. Maggie, thanks so much for putting it in the chat for our Energy Justice 101 training. That will be really, really good. If I have a project that can bring awareness, well, I say if you have a project that can bring awareness, please pitch it to, of course, the leadership team at MWBDC. So we can figure out one, of course, we have to be strategic. Is it aligned with the priorities that the membership came up with? And then three, how is it going to be resourced? Because it takes money to do projects, especially locally. So Leslie, hit me up and we'd love to get your thoughts. All right. And next steps, if you are interested in forming a working group, or being a part of the working group, please reach out to me, or join Midwest BDC. Please reach out to me or Maggie. And if you're interested in writing a blog post or anything you heard in regards to strategy, theory, change, anything exciting that your organization is doing, please reach out to Maggie and you will get a copy of the slide deck recording and the links as promised. Thank you and don't forget to connect with us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and we do have our website, MWBDC.org. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend. Happy Father's Day, happy Juneteenth, and happy June to everyone.